I was about to bring the first spoonful of mashed potatoes to my mouth when David screamed from across the table. "Grandma, don't eat that!" His voice came out so loud and desperate that everyone stopped immediately. My name is Josephine, and today I need to tell you about something I never imagined I'd experience. On Christmas night, a date that should be a celebration, I nearly ended up in the hospital, and the reason, unfortunately, won't surprise you. Because this situation that so many women face within their own homes is far more common than the world likes to admit. My son Jacob had married Natalie 8 years ago, and since then I'd been trying to build a good relationship with her. It wasn't easy. Natalie had always been distant, but I insisted on believing it was just shyness. My little grandson David was the joy of my life. That 7-year-old boy had his father's eyes and a huge heart. Whenever he visited my house, he'd run straight to my room and ask to see the wooden chest that had belonged to my mother. Inside it, I kept the jewelry I'd inherited from my family. They weren't extremely expensive pieces, but they had immense sentimental value. There were gold rings that had belonged to my grandmother, a silver necklace my mother never took off, earrings I'd received at my wedding. Each piece told a story, and David, like a curious child, loved hearing them. Natalie knew this. She always appeared when I opened the chest, standing in the bedroom doorway with that fixed stare, watching everything in silence. That Christmas night, everyone arrived around 8 o'clock. Jacob brought a bottle of tequila to share with his cousins. David, my little grandson, jumped into my lap as soon as he came in, warming my heart as he'd done since the day he was born. Natalie, on the other hand, came in and greeted me with that same cold kiss on the cheek, without even asking if I was well, an indifference that had already become part of our routine, but still hurt. We went to the table, and I began serving food to everyone, as I'd done every year with love and dedication. I'd prepared mashed potatoes, roast turkey, and the pumpkin pie that Jacob had loved since he was a boy. My eyes filled with pride, seeing my family gathered together, even though I knew these moments were becoming increasingly rare. When I was putting food on my sister's plates, Natalie stood up and said she wanted to help me, something she never did. In that instant, I believed for a second that perhaps the Christmas spirit had touched her heart, that maybe, just that night, she could set aside her indifference toward me. I was even happy about the gesture. Oh, how naive I was. She took a plate and went to the kitchen. She stayed there for a few minutes. When she came back, she placed the plate in front of me with a smile that seemed strange to me, but I didn't think much of it. I didn't suspect anything. I started talking with Jacob and my nephews about their work. David was telling me about his new school. My sisters were talking about the aches that come with age, and everything seemed normal. I was about to bring the first spoonful of mashed potatoes to my mouth when David screamed from across the table, "Grandma, don't eat that!" His voice came out so loud and desperate that everyone stopped immediately. Jacob dropped his fork on his plate. Natalie looked at me startled, and I looked at my grandson without understanding anything. David's eyes were wide, filled with tears, and he was pointing at my plate with his finger. "I saw Mommy put something in your food, Grandma. I saw it. I thought it was some kind of joke from my grandson and couldn't believe what I was hearing." I looked at Natalie, expecting her to laugh, to say the boy was confused, that this was an absurd misunderstanding. But she said nothing. She just stared at her son with anger. Jacob got up from his chair and asked what was happening. He questioned why David was making up these things about his own mother. His voice was irritated and impatient. Natalie crossed her arms, pretending to be offended, as if she were the biggest victim of that night. David started crying and repeated that he'd seen his mother take a small bottle from her purse and pour something onto my plate when she came back from the kitchen. He said he was scared but didn't know what to do. Natalie, completely agitated, told David to shut up. She said the boy was lying, that he had too much imagination, that he spent all day watching cartoons and making up stories. She tried to laugh, but the sound that came from her mouth was forced, almost desperate. My nephews fell silent, paying attention. My sisters tried to ease the tension, saying it was a child's game. Jacob looked at me, then at his son, and asked David to repeat exactly what he'd seen. The boy, even while crying, described everything in minute detail. He said his mother had looked around before opening her purse, that she took out a small, transparent bottle, and that she poured the liquid right in the middle of my plate, stirring quickly with the spoon. I felt my stomach turn. I pushed the plate away and stared at Natalie. I asked what that was. She denied it again, said she was being accused unjustly, that I was believing a child instead of trusting her. But I knew my grandson. David never lied. Jacob grabbed Natalie's purse that was hanging on the chair and started searching inside. She tried to stop him, screamed that this was invasion of privacy, but he didn't stop. And then he found it. A small bottle, almost empty, with a transparent liquid inside. Jacob asked what that was. Natalie didn't answer. My son grabbed his phone and said he was going to call the police. It was at that moment that Natalie panicked. She started crying and begged Jacob not to do that, said she could explain everything, that things weren't as they seemed. But the more she talked, the more I felt an emptiness growing inside me. I asked what she had put in my food. She took a while to answer, but finally admitted it was a very strong laxative. She said she only wanted to make me sick, nothing more, that I would have pain, would need to go to the hospital, but that it wasn't anything serious. My sisters became agitated, and Jacob lost it. He shouted, asking why she would do such a thing. Natalie confessed that she wanted me to be hospitalized so she could get into my house alone. At the time, she knew where I kept the spare key. Her plan was simple. While I was in the hospital, she would come in here, take the jewelry chest, and pretend the house had been robbed. She said she'd spent the apartment payment money, the money Jacob always transferred to her account, on expensive brand-name clothes and shoes, just to impress her friends from work. She said she didn't like feeling inferior, that she was ashamed of her simple clothes. And so now the apartment payment was overdue, she needed money, and those jewels were the only way out she could see. My head was spinning trying to process all of this. The woman my son had chosen to marry, the mother of my grandson, was willing to send me to the hospital for some old jewelry. I couldn't speak. Jacob was in shock too. He looked at his wife as if he were seeing a stranger. David kept crying, clinging to me, saying he was scared. Natalie tried to justify herself. She said she wasn't going to kill me, that it was just to make me sick, that I'd be fine after a few days. As if that made a difference. As if her intention was less serious because of that. I asked if she had any idea what could have happened. I have high blood pressure, heart problems. I take controlled medications every day. A strong laxative like that could have caused severe dehydration, cardiac arrest, anything. She lowered her head and didn't answer. Jacob called the police. While we waited, the house that minutes before had been full of lights and Christmas joy turned into a nightmare scene. David wouldn't let go of me, and I held that boy with all the strength I had left. It was he who saved me. A 7-year-old boy had the courage that many adults wouldn't have. The police arrived 15 minutes later. They took the bottle for analysis and took Natalie in for questioning. She left in handcuffs, crying, screaming that she'd made a mistake, that she was sorry. Jacob stood at the door, watching the police car drive away. When he came back inside, he sat on the sofa and put his hands on his face. He apologized more times than I can count. He said he never imagined his wife was capable of something like this, that he felt guilty for bringing that woman into our family. I had no words to comfort him, because I myself was still trying to understand everything. I stayed up all night. David slept with me, clinging to my arm, and I lay there looking at the ceiling, thinking about how greed can transform people into something unrecognizable. Natalie was charged with attempted poisoning. The case is still ongoing, but she'll answer for what she did. Jacob filed for divorce the following month. He said he could never look at her again without feeling disgust and fear. Today, several months later, I still feel a tightness in my chest when I remember that night. Not because of the jewelry, not because of the chest, but because of the coldness with which she planned everything. She was willing to see me suffer, to see me hospitalized, maybe even at risk of death, just to get what she wanted. What scares me most is thinking that if it hadn't been for David, I would have eaten that food. I would have gotten sick, gone to the hospital, and never known the truth. Natalie would have entered my house, taken the jewelry, and I probably would have believed it was a common burglary. She would have succeeded, but a child's innocence brought it all crashing down. Today, I look at my grandson with a gratitude that can't be put into words. He saved me without even fully understanding what he was doing. He just felt something was wrong and screamed. Sometimes that's all it takes. A voice that rises up, even trembling with fear, even being small. I keep the jewelry chest in the same place as always. Not out of stubbornness, but because I won't let one person's evil change who I am or destroy the memories these pieces carry. They continue to belong to my mother, my grandmother, and my history. And no one will take that from me. I learned that trust is something fragile, that it can be broken in seconds. But I also learned that true love, that pure and selfless kind, still exists. It's in the eyes of a grandson who chooses to protect his grandmother rather than stay silent. And that, in the end, is worth more than any jewel.